Hi, I think I made it in.
Hey there. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being patient with us this afternoon. We did run into a few technical difficulties. Patrik and I did record a pre-recorded portion for the virtual curators tour this morning. We just ran into a few difficulties with the uploading. So that will be available later this afternoon, and we will make sure to forward that to everybody. However, I believe Patrik will be kind of walking us through some still images as well that he's prepared, kind of impromptu as we've been going through these difficulties. So maybe I'll just start with our kind of traditional preamble. Of course, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon, as well as for Patrik for giving us the tour, both the pre-recorded and this kind of impromptu one. I would like to begin by acknowledging that Griffin Art Projects is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Stolo nations. We are honored and grateful to undertake our work here. My name is Nathaniel Marchand, and I'm the Virtual Programs Coordinator here at Griffin Art Projects. Just a few quick housekeeping notes before we jump into today's presentation. I wanted to mention that if you would like to see live captions displayed for today's presentation, you can enable this by selecting the CC Live Transcription button at the bottom of your screen. I also wanted to mention that if you are experiencing any technical issues with the Zoom event, we will be sharing it with you later and broadcasting it over Facebook. I would also like to mention that we are using Zoom's webinar format, which means that we cannot see or hear you. But if you do feel to get in touch, you can use the chat dialogue. And there will also be a Q&A portion at the end of today's presentation. So you'll notice that the chat and Q&A boxes are separate from one another. So you will want to maybe put your questions into the Q&A box. And if there's any technical difficulties, you can raise the little hand or feel free to chat and we can try and help you out over there. So today's virtual event, guest curator Patrik Andersson will be giving a tour of Griffin Art Project's current exhibition, Teeth, Loan, and Trust Company, Consolidated, the Trylowsky Collection. This exhibition highlights an impressive collection of artwork acquired by Dr. Zenon Trylowsky over the past 25 years, mainly through acts of exchange with artists for dental services in his Vancouver clinic. The exhibition also foregrounds his support of the independent curatorial platform Trap Projects, who for more than a decade used Trylowsky's dental office as an alternative curatorial space. The exhibition title refers to a fake check made and signed by the French artist Marcel Duchamp in lieu of payment owed to American dentist Dr. Tsank in 1919. So without further ado, I'll introduce today's speaker, Patrik Andersson. Patrik is an associate professor in the O'Dane Faculty of Art at Emily Carr University of Art and Design, and a freelance art critic and curator. Andersson received a PhD in art history from the University of British Columbia with a dissertation on the post-war reception of Marcel Duchamp's work. He has curated exhibitions locally and internationally since the late 1980s and operates Trap Projects, an independent curatorial and publishing platform founded in 1997. His publications include Niki de Saint-Feli's Killing Game, Happenings, Performance, and Theater, Inner and Outer Space, Rethinking Movement in Art, and Hitting the Nail on the Head, Rodney Graham's Impressionist Games. He has written extensively on the intersection between pop culture, subcultures, and contemporary art, including the book Inside Magazine's Independent Pop Cultures magazines. He is currently a guest curator at the O'Dane Art Museum in Whistler, where he is working on Out of Control, the Concrete Art of Skateboarding, a major exhibition set to open in the summer of 2022. So with that, Patrik, thanks for joining us, and I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you. And if I seem rather scattered here, I just walked in the door from driving over the bridge, and I did manage to get a coffee. So thanks for your patience. And I just found out as I was walking in that our video has not uploaded properly. So I'm going to do, I just grabbed some slides. These are just iPhone slides. So it's nothing that impressive. You need to go and see the exhibition for yourselves to get the proper tour, or wait for what will be uploaded, I assume, later as a proper tour. So this is a bit impromptu, as they say. Now I'm wondering if I can share my screen. So I'm going to see if I can do this. Oh, Could I have some help in allowing me to co-host here? I am
Pretty good to go
disabled.
now. Sorry about that.
Okay, let's see here. Share screen. Okay. Now I trust that your screen is yellow now, and if it's not, then please alert me. Yeah, so the title of this exhibition, Teeth Loan and Trust Companies Consolidated, the Trailowsky Collection, it's a bit long. As my wife Judith Steedman, designer, likes to say, I always come up with very long titles that are a nightmare for designers. So I apologize for that, but it's an appropriated title, and I blame Marcel Duchamp for this. It was the name of a check, of a company check that he invented in 1919 in response to a dental bill of $115 that he owed his dentist, Dr. Zank, spelled Tzanck. So it's known as the check is now known as the Zank check. Before I dive into the relationship between a 1919 fake check as a bartering mechanism for a financially struggling artist in 1919, I'd like to just make some acknowledgement besides the land acknowledgements that were mentioned, and just to thank in particularly Lisa Baldassara for giving me this opportunity and trusting me to do this, put this exhibition together. There were a lot of variables in this exhibition. There's 53 artists, it turns out. I don't think Lisa expected that from the get-go. And there's close to 100 works in the exhibition. I want to thank Brittany Greutlers, who's been supporting, like answering emails and questions and responding to things endlessly. Thank you for your incredible work, and the staff. It's a broad staff to thank, but I want to particularly mention, other than Nathaniel, who's helping us out here today, the hanging committee, the installers, Christian, Martin, and Patrik. Thank you very much. You managed to make the show look very calm and organized, despite all. And of course, I want to thank Brigitte and Henning Freiby for starting this incredible project space that, when they initially were about to open this, they came to me and asked me for ideas about exhibitions that could focus on researching and opening up different models of collecting. And that's where this idea came from, this exhibition. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I like the idea of a collection that maybe didn't start off with the idea of being a collection, but became a collection. And in fact, when I approached Dr. Zenon Trailowski to play this exhibition game, if you will, the first thing he said was that he's not a collector, which is where he was wrong, as it turns out. And in fact, I think he admitted this at the opening of the exhibition, that he realizes now he has a collection, and it's an impressive collection at that. So I want to thank everyone for letting me move these objects around. In the 1950s, Marcel Duchamp did something else, and seeing that he's kind of an inspiration for this show. He put out a green box. It was known as the green box. It was called The Bride Stripped Bare by Her Bachelor Stephen. It was notes, facsimiles, notes of all the artwork he had done and all the notes that would explain his practice to someone who didn't understand it. And, it was a practice that basically sets up a conversation between art and science, engineering and science, and so on. And I see this exhibition as a little bit, for me personally, as like a meeting between a doctor of one type and a doctor of another. But in this box, this green box, what was amazing about this box of explanations, if you will, of all his visual and literary puns, is that you could mix up all his work in any direction, in any order, and it would make just as much sense. And I think of this when I look at the collection that I found in Dr. Trailowski's office, home, and storage, is that this could have been put together in many different ways, this exhibition. And so I'm going to take you through a curatorial tour of my choices and why I put certain things together and others not. There were works that are not included. So some decisions were made as such. And this had nothing to do whether an artist was well known or not well known, by the way, or emerging or established. It came out of practical reasons. So let's see. Like I said, I'm doing this on a 5-minute note. I've pulled together some slides out of my phone for you, and but I thought something that you wouldn't see in that walkthrough that didn't upload is you wouldn't see images of the dental office. So I thought maybe I'll give you a kind of, I hope the doctor is okay with this, that I showcase some pictures from his office, what his office looks like on a general, on a normal day. Of course, the office changes over time and the art in it changes over time. But this is a picture that we've used on the website and so on, and it shows a work by Eric Metcalf from 1986 that was done for the dentist that owned the practice prior to Zenon Trailowski taking over this dental practice in 1996. And that was Doug Foster, who I'm assuming, I would have to ask Doug, but I'm assuming was a bartering between the artist and the dentist. Dr. Brute, or Eric Metcalf, aka Dr. Brute, produced this leopard pattern, which is characteristic of him, of course. You know, he imagined a whole world kind of covered, or buildings covered by this pattern, by his sign, if you will, back in the 70s and 80s and onwards. And so this is the only work I think that's always in the office because it's attached to the wall. There's some details. This is what the waiting room looked like a few months ago before we started removing things from the walls. We have a work by Adad Hanna on the left from his Russian series. And then on the right, you have a work by Graham Gilmore, I Barely Touched You. And I think, you know, both of these, as you're sitting waiting for your dental appointment, are amusing in its own way, but also contemplative in various ways, whether it is contemplating the relationship between video and painting, or whether it's contemplating film that looks like a photograph, or a painting that behaves like a text, and so on. It's another view of the waiting room, in this case, a work by Rodney Graham, a camera obscura work from 1996, and on the left, a newspaper work by watercolor by Neil Wedman. I must have taken this picture before COVID because the chairs are spread out now. And actually, something that I should point out is when I organized this exhibition, when we decided to do this exhibition, it was a little bit like, I felt a little bit like a dentist looking into someone's mouth to see what is the condition of the, you know, how many teeth, are there enough teeth, are there some that need to be extracted, are there some that need to be fixed? And some of these works needed to be restored, such as this trans-mounted photograph from 1996 that had faded over those 25 years quite a bit. So the work that you will see in the exhibition is a reprinted brand new version of this work. And then there are the various dental rooms. This is one example where you see in the background some bridge work by Kim Kennedy Austin, watercolor. or you may say an Ankawara, although this is not an Ankawara, this is a Ron Terada knockoff painting for a knockoff show at the Ore Gallery back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And on the right is a molar drawn by text from a quote from Margaret Atwood's The Blind Assassin. Eric Metcalf on the left, a newer work. And on the right, you see a Vicky Alexander the Gorda Punta reflected. We had to reprint that one as well. So it was an opportunity to do some cosmetic work or fill some holes and things in the collection. There you go. And then on the left here, you have a work by Neil Wedman, which I think is characteristic of the kind of like beautiful work and humor that one expects to see at this dentist office as you sit there. Going to the dentist has never been one of my favorite activities, but I have to say, going to this particular dentist, I find lots of distractions and things to laugh at. And laughing is not necessarily what the first thing you think about going to the dentist. So I decided to put this laughing gas painting, oil painting from 1998 by Neil Wedman as the first work that you see when you enter the exhibition, which you will see in the tour when that gets uploaded. And if you don't read Laughing Gas, I think in a photograph you read it relatively quickly, that the beaker's reflections spell out laughing gas. But as you sit there in the chair, the first time I saw it, I didn't read it. I saw it as an abstraction. I saw it as realism of beakers and so on. But eventually, of course, once you read the painting as laughing gas, then it's hard to go back. Maybe easy to go back to the dentist, but not easy to go back to abstraction. This is just, pictures that I have from like going through his archive and pulling things out. And I show you these 2 out of 6. Did we have 8? No, 6 works by Lincoln Clarks from his bicycle series. And they are the works that you see as you exit the gallery. So this is the work that you enter the gallery with. This is the work that you leave it with. And I thought it was appropriate to put photographs of people on bicycles right by the entrance exit door to the Griffin Art Project, because as you walk out, you need to be aware that there's a bicycle path. In fact, I've been hit, I think, almost 3 times. So that's my little fair game warning. Pay attention to what the art has to tell you. Now, terrible photographs, and I apologize. I had not meant to show any of these. These are from my phone. But as you enter, the exhibition is divided into different sections. You could say that there's the reception area, much like at a dentist office. And then you walk into, a slightly different area that I've curated. It's the lowest, it's the part of the gallery that has a low ceiling that feels most kind of homey or something, or comfortable in terms of like scale. So I'll show you a couple of images from that. So we've put small works there from the collection. Just show you quickly various angles of this room. And so if we go back, if you're looking at this, if you look behind you here, this is what you see. And these are 3 works by, on the left, Kim Kennedy Austin. I mentioned her before. And then on the right is a work by Rodney Graham, Are You a Doctor, Sir? Which is a reference where he found identical phrases in the work of Sigmund Freud and Charles Baudelaire. And he weaves a narrative between them that becomes a kind of hypothetical kind of question about whether or not they're actually in dialogue with each other, even though as they're writing, their psychoanalytic meanderings and their poetic meanderings, if you will. And I thought that was nice to have next to Kim's work as they're both two different types of word hunting games or language games, I suppose. As you can probably see, Sigmund Freud, who's holding the cigar, he seems to be looking at the sculpture by Alex Tedley Stuchberg. It's a bronze sculpture that's made from he made a cast out of from a piece of styrofoam that washed up on the shores of one of the islands. I think Malcolm Island. I could be wrong. And so he's cast into bronze, and it functions as a kind of course, a reminder of the ecological crisis, of course, or barnacles for that matter. But it also functions as an incense holder. And I thought of that kind of incense. Imagine that kind of incense coming out of it, and you have Sigmund Freud's cigar in the background. I mean, you need a little bit of imagination, I suppose, for that. Or maybe you need to smoke something for that. I don't know. But and I thought, Sigmund Freud seems to be looking at this. And if he's looking at this, he probably doesn't see it as a piece of styrofoam. He sees it probably as an object that looks like a kind of an abject face. I would imagine if he was to psychoanalyze this object, or why the artist has chosen this particular piece of styrofoam to cast into bronze. To me, it looks, as an art historian, it looks like a hostage sculpture by Jean Fautré, the existentialist from the 1940s. Again, it's kind of up to the viewer, I guess. So these kind of, to me, kind of uncanny kind of relationships are being played out in the way I placed work, I suppose. Also, I wanted some fairly quiet, I wanted a very kind of relaxed and quiet beginning. Once you get into the work, of course, it's not very relaxed, but, this wall, Lisa and I kind of DJ'd. The starting point was the Face by David Cordy, an LA-based artist who comes up to Vancouver to fish on occasion. And I taught a course with him one year, and he had a really bad toothache and could barely teach. And so somehow this work ended up in the dentist's collection. You can imagine why. We structured this wall. We decided to have the smaller works in the collection, or some of the smaller works in the collection on this wall. And we decided to structure the wall according to like the shape of that mouth in that David Cordy image, to the best of our ability, I suppose. The other thing about the David Cordy as a starting point for that wall, it's also a work that if you were to look closely, you would see the mouth is made up of letters in a nonsensical way. So it's again a kind of like concrete poetry language game being played out visually here. It's a work by TNT, Tony Romano and Tyler Brett on the left. And on the right here, you have work by Tim Barber on the left, New York-based artist who went to Emily Carr back in early 2000s. Images that were shot right around 9/11, in fact. He went back, he was still a student at Emily Carr, he went back to New York on a break and witnessed the falling of the Twin Towers, and some of these images were taken at that time. And I would say his work, in the tradition of, say, Nan Goldin or someone like that, he doesn't believe in the single image. He likes to see the still photograph as if a film still. And so I thought that the relationship between film and photography gets played out at Hannah's video on the right, from the Russian series, except it's in the reverse. He makes a film that behaves like a photograph. This is, of course, very funny when you sit in the wait room and you're looking at these two people that seemingly wait for you, but they're waiting for the photographer to finish, I suppose. And so we had two chairs. Yeah, you get it. Then we enter the big room. The big room is filled with stuff. And, we tried to hang things so that it wouldn't look so full. So we've done little clusters like this. I should also point out that there's a soundtrack that you can hear throughout the exhibition, and it's soundtrack. It's music made by Tyler Brett, who collaborated with Tony Romano as TNT, but in this case collaborated as making the sound for Tony Romano's film Lost Rose, which you can see on a double TV screen. And Lost Rose is a film it's a film made with reference to George Buchner's story of Votek, in which a young soldier returns from war and has hallucinatory apocalyptic dreams. The film is in some sense a response, I would suggest, I could be completely wrong here, but I read it as such, a response to Vexation Island by Rodney Graham. But it does everything in a kind of, it changes all the aspects. So instead of a man on a remote island, it's a woman in a remote forest. Instead of one single film, it's two films. The front shows the beginning and the back shows the end of the film. You can't see it through, you have to walk around. And what loops it or connects it is the soundtrack, the music score. So this is kind of from the perspective of that TV, of those TV monitors. You have a large kind of salon style hanging of works ranging from Evan Lee to Hannah Dubois, Kelly Lycan, Christos Dikakos, David Cordy, Graham Gilmore, Neil Wedman, Shannon Oxenen, Mark Gilbert, who am I missing? Ron Torada, Matthew McWilliams. And on the, that's the kind of the cluster that you see here on the left side. Evan Lee told me that this photograph that you see on the top left was the first photograph he ever sold. So it's kind of nice to see that that was part here. And actually on the right, on the far right of this image is a large painting by Attila Richard Lukács, which was, I believe, the first work that Dr. Trailowski received in return for some dental work. On the other wall, on the opposite wall, it's a few less pieces, but they're relatively large works. There's 5 works there, not counting the vitrine. On the far left is Tom Burrows, and then you have Robert Klein. So you have Aquavit from, is the title of Tom Burrows, and then you have an untitled work by Robert Klein, and then you have Vicky Alexander's Punta Gorda Reflected, and then you have Karen Bubash, and I should get the title correct, sorry, I should have that in my head, but you have Karen Bubash, Red Coat and Mountain Vista. And on the top right corner, you will see, high up, you will see a work by Neil Campbell called Portal. The Portal, all of the work, I think, you know, on the main wall there, kind of in some way deal with the landscape and also, but the constructed nature of that landscape in different ways. Oops, sorry, that's the other side. There's the reprinted Graham print, and then that work up by Neil Campbell up at the top, you know, is a work that in minimalist fashion kind of absorbs and projects. It's a portal, so it goes 2 ways, I suppose. All sides of the gallery, it connects, and it's meant actually to, but the ceiling's too high here, it's meant to actually touch the ceiling as well. So it addresses all aspects of the viewing space as well as the built space. A reference, I suppose, to Casimir Malevich's Black Square that was also exhibited in a corner. In here, you have everything from Marcel Duchamp's Zank Check on the right above the Eric Metcalf plate. and you have some early work that was traded for a really bad dental situation by TNT. You have the posters for The Lost Rose, and you have the box for Ron Terada's Onkawara knockoff. This little wall here, this little cluster, it was quite nice how that came together. I've often looked at this tree by Attila Richard Lucas on the left and thought that it's a bit like a kind of, you know, if Rodney Graham's Fixation Island, where he shakes a palm tree to get a coconut that falls and hits him on the head. This is kind of like what it would have looked like if it was shot in BC or something. It's looking up a tree, however you interpret that. So I placed that next to two works by Rodney Graham. On the bottom, artist in Artist Bar, 1950s, in which he uses himself to act or to sit in a constructed, I wouldn't call it generic, but kind of typical artist bar, stereotypical artist bar. In which you can see, actually, when you go and see it up close, that obviously this lumberjack jacket wearing artist has not made enough money to pay for food, but has come with a work of art to trade for art, and probably all the work up on the wall already in that bar was traded for food. And some of those paintings on the wall behind were painted by Rodney Graham. I'm not sure if all of them were. In any case, I thought it was kind of structurally nice to put one of Rodney Graham's actual paintings from the collection of Trailowski above it, for obvious reasons. That was like a no-brainer, putting an emerging artist like Cameron Kerr, his thought forms next to Eric Metcalf's geometric abstractions. You got organic and geometric abstraction playing off against each other. Or here, two former classmates, they graduated the same year from Emily Carr on the left, Graham Gilmore and Derek Root, next to a work by Isabel Powell's is Untitled. It was done for a knockoff show at the Orr, and to me this was nice to put on the other side of the Neil Campbell work, which was making a reference to Malevich, because this work makes a reference to Tatlin via Dan Flavin's minimalism. There's a better picture maybe. This room came about, I think it was Lisa that suggested to me it might be nice to have a number of the works played off. They had an architectural kind of relationship, and so this room started out with that, with this work by Parvin Pevandi. She right now, by the way, has a show at the Broad Art Foundation. Everybody should go see. Plays off well against, and I don't have a detail of David Cordy's abstracted urban architectural landscape, but also the color of the particular patina in this work here. It's a green pigment she brought back from Iran that she has then made an encaustic painting on metal with. Seemed to have a nice relationship with Eric Metcalf's work in the corner there. Eric Metcalf, of course, was also interested in architecture, like, in terms of covering covering as if ornament architecture with leopard patterns. So there's something about ornament here going on, I think. Oh, and of course, the large work by Tom Burrows called Hematoma. And on the opposite wall to these And again, it's like a material play in terms of curating. It's Kelly Lycan on the left and Al McWilliams on the right. And I thought the lead-like, or the kind of gunpowder feel to the lichen and the lead of Al McWilliams played off nicely with this. Again, about kind of architecture ornament. And I'm sorry, these are the only slides that I literally had 2 minutes to grab some slides. I have some other slides that relate. Maybe what I'll do is I'm gonna just very quickly move out of that mode and see what I have here in terms of other slides. If somebody has a question while I'm digging up some images, that could work too. Okay, 1 second here. Okay, I'm going to grab a couple of slides and throw them in here. 1 and 2. Okay, wait. Okay, now I can start again. Sorry. Okay. Is that visible? Oh, there's something in the chat here. Let's see if it's working. Yes, thank you. Feel free to ask questions. This, across from this little room with the Tom Burrows and the Kelly Lycan and all those works, is this room. And I realize I'm missing one crucial ingredient that in between these, which is a video work by Tim Lee. I'll try to find that image in a second. That separates those two sections, and it's a work. It's a really amazing work, film work. But on the other side, then, and I'm sorry about the not the very good slides, but we've made an archive where we have selected works, just a few, kind of like a sampling of work that was included at some point in exhibitions at Dr. Zenon Trailowski's back office that we referred to as the Trailowski Gallery. And this was a kind of a playground for trap projects for 10 years, as I said earlier, I think. So you have here work by, and I don't know if my pointer works, but these are two works by Shannon Oxenen. It's a work by Holly Ward. And I should point out that for both of these artists, I think it was one of their first public exhibitions of work. So this, you know, just to speak of the value and the generosity of Dr. Trailowski lending out this space, which may not have seemed like a space of consequence at the time, but in the long run, I think it was. There's two works by Lotta Antonsson, an artist from Sweden that we invited. And actually, Zenon Trailowski paid for the airfare from LA. And I remember they stayed on my couch, the artist and her husband. There's a work by Marcel Duchamp that we had in one exhibition called Fluttering Hearts. That was a show with Tony Romano. And a work from an exhibition by Claire Greenshaw. And then some work by Arnie Haroldson. Oh, and on the floor is a light box, dental light box with work by Mevang McLeod. And so very quickly, I'm just going to shoot through very quickly some images that I happen to have related to trap projects at the Trailowski Gallery. So bear with me here. I'm just very fast. Some invites, for example. This was that show in 1997. That was the exhibition. Notice the chair. I decided to include that Philip Nelson chair in the exhibition because there was always this furniture, modernist furniture, that we included in the exhibition that was part of his office. Lotta Antonsson, again, these are not the best pictures, but just to give you an idea of some of the shows that happened at the Trailowski. Arnie Haroldson. This was actually an exhibition focused on not only Arnie Haroldson, of course, but the subject matter was really Malaparte, the Italian fascist poet, whose ego you could say was matched by the architects who built his villa in Capri. They had a huge ego too, and claimed that the building was supported of them, not him. And then you had on top of it later Godard, Jean-Luc Godard, who claimed that his film Contempt, which was filmed on that villa, was a portrait of him. This was really a portrait show, you could say, in that sense. And in those days, to take this photograph, I remember Arnie had to, it was very difficult to get these shots. He had to use a relatively small camera, climb over fences to get these shots, because the property was rented by the Chinese government as an embassy house, and people couldn't enter it very easily. And so, and he made a film loop from a scene of this movie by Jean-Luc Godard for that show. So the show kind of looked like this. You get the idea. They're not very good images because, you know, I took slides in those days and they've all faded or gotten dirty. But you still get a little bit of a sense of the, and in those days, this little back office had a drop ceiling. I mean, it was not, you know, the perfect gallery, the standard gallery. It felt like an office, except we removed everything but the art and a couple of pieces of furniture. These are images I found from a show with Ian Sked, 4 proposals for living units, it was called. They're all based on his own apartment's layout. This was the invitation for Hollywood's exhibition. And I put this image in to remind one that in those days, for me as an emerging artist, curator, it was really amazing to be given the opportunity to, just like it is at the Griffin, by the way, to have, you know, support, not only in giving me the space to experiment and do things with artists, but also, you know, then Trailowski was a dentist, he had a secretary. So to see the show, you could come to the opening, and after that, it was by appointment only. And so you'd have to call the secretary, and then she'd book an appointment, and I would run down, take the bus down and meet people. And I remember taking the bus down to meet, you know, family and friends, but also meeting like curators like Joaquin Visor or Scott Watson and Grant Arnold and people like that. And yeah, it was a very good central location as well. This was her show. And if you know her work these days, you would know that Hollywood is still, you know, building this new colony, if you will. So one of those panels, control panels, is in the exhibition at the Griffin, the one on the far right. Claire Greenshaw. This was the last show, and I don't have images of every show, but this was the last show, and by that time, the building had been renovated as well. So the office, this is the same space. They had got rid of the drop ceiling, they had got rid of the carpet, and look what was underneath. It suddenly became a very fancy gallery. It felt more like a smoking room at the Vancouver Club or something like that. But this is a show with Claire Greenshaw. We made a bookwork for that. And there was a video haiku, if you will, where you see her picking books and walking up to the camera and giving us words from the book. And openings, I should say, looked kind of like this. Every opening was like packed with people, and, you know, it was kind of an excitement about it for me, certainly. But, you know, and I look at these pictures now, I look back and I realize that, you know, the amount of support these artists received from Trailowski, but as well as all these people that would show up to these openings. And just in the image on the top left, I see, you know, Hollywood, Claire Greenshaw, Isabel Powell's, Corin Sworn, Miguel de Corso. I see Neil Campbell, who's in our show at the Griffin right now, and numerous other friends and so on. So Tony Romano, Marcel Duchamp. I thought this show would either make Tony Romano very famous or Marcel Duchamp seem young. And I threw in this picture because this is what those two works looked like before I stole them from the doctor's home. But yeah, so anyway, that's all I brought. I'm going to go back to something that looks like the exhibition, and maybe we can, yeah, what about that? Maybe we can start a conversation instead. So sorry, that was supposed to be a very different kind of presentation. I hope that wasn't too painful. Oh, I've lost.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in and join you here for a moment, Patrik.
Yeah, I think I've lost.
Were you hoping to continue sharing your screen for a moment? Did you have more to share?
Oh, you know, you can take it off. It doesn't matter. You can do anything.
Yeah, so I just wanted to echo some of the opinions in the chat that, considering all the technical difficulties, that was really engaging. It was nice to see some of the additional materials too that we wouldn't have had in our pre-recorded tour from various other exhibitions done at the Trailowski Gallery. So just a reminder to everybody as well that we are going to be beginning our Q&A portion soon. So if you do have questions for Patrik, you can type them into the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those. Maybe I'll just kick us off here. I'm intrigued, Patrik, to know maybe some of the key differences, whether it might be challenges or creative opportunities that there is between curating an exhibition in something like a dentist's office or some of the other alternative venues that you may have curated in versus something like Griffin Art Projects or a more commercial gallery.
So the question is, how was this different from those other kinds of projects?
Yeah, in your experience curating in something like the Trailowski Gallery or other things you've done in Trap, kind of what are some of the key differences versus the more traditional galleries that you've worked that typically are showing art, the kind of white cube?
Right. Well, first of all, I have to admit that I'm a little bit restless, and if I have a habit, if an opportunity comes up, I kind of go for it. The main so if somebody offers me a space to curate an exhibition, I'm often very flattered. I don't take it for granted. I don't always do it. I mean, it has to be conditions that, you know, where I think I can do something that interests me, but could potentially interest someone else. The main difference, I guess, I mean, I teach a curatorial class right now at Emily Carr, and one thing that I like to say, and I believe so, is that I really don't think it matters whether your gallery is like a shoebox, like literally a shoebox, or a museum. You should be able to do something interesting with both. Now, having said that, there are advantages with doing things at the Griffin Arts Project as opposed to in a shoebox. I have a bigger audience. I have people helping me and talking to me, and you know, it's a social kind of, it's a different kind of thing. And there's actually finances that I wasn't part of kind of creating to make this exhibition happen. That comes with a certain amount of responsibility. The nice thing about a shoebox is if something goes wrong, nobody cares because it's a shoebox. So there's advantages to doing things in a shoebox. There's advantages of doing things in a museum or a gallery, professional space, and I think one just has to be responsive to the situation. An example I like to give is I was approached by Scott Massey and Lara Colici. They have a gallery on Bowen Island called Terminal Creek Contemporary. They moved to Bowen Island. They decided to open a contemporary art space there, and they approached me to curate the first show in their gallery. The first question I think I had was, "What's your budget?" And they said, "We don't have any money." And so I said, "I'll do it." And the reason why I was attracted to that at that instant was because A, I knew them. I mean, Scott Massey is an artist, and Laura Colici is well, at the time she had been working as a fundraiser for the Belkin and all kinds of things at UBC and so on, and they're good people and so on. But also I thought, like, if they're not spending money on this, I have a certain amount of freedom to do what I want to do. Now, in some cases, people do have money, and they do give you that freedom. And I think in this case, I was given a lot of freedom, and I feel sorry for Lisa and the staff for that freedom, because, you know, I think Lisa thought there was going to be about 30 artists. There are almost twice as many artists in the show. This comes with costs. This comes with difficulties and, you know, labor and all kinds of things. But they offered me that freedom to kind of allow myself to have the exhibition not set in stone from the get-go, but grow and kind of develop. So for me, the curatorial part worked for me, because I see curating not as like, sending out a product or something like that you've developed. I see it more as a kind of research practice. So, and that's what I meant when I went through the show. This exhibition, like Duchamp's box of notes, it can be rearranged in any order. You don't have to curate it the way I did it. It can be put together in a completely different way. But, what was nice was that the Lisa and everybody, they trusted me to, they put a lot of trust in it. But I don't think you need to be, whether that's an institution or not. I mean, of course, there's an advantage if you have an institution that applies for Canada Council funds, so you can make a catalog. That's huge, because I think it's great for the artist that their work circulates outside of the gallery, beyond the show. But, those early shows at the Trailowsky, and we have some examples of that in the vitrines in the show, I remember like typesetting those catalogs and designing those invites, which I really enjoyed. And I remember like Rodney Graham teaching me how to sew a catalog, because I couldn't afford to get it bound. I couldn't even get it staple bound. It was cheaper for me to do it by myself. So there's no budget and so on. But in the end, I think the end result was just as good in a way. But of course, distribution, circulation. Nowadays we have Zoom. What an institution allows for is a different kind of audience. But it doesn't mean that the exhibition is any more or less interesting, I would say. Whether you have, whether you work independently in a hallway or whether you do it in an institution. You got to respond to the space.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for that insightful answer. I do see one question in the Q&A, so maybe I'll read that one out. It's from Mandeep Work. Interesting artworks in this dentist art collection. I cannot help but think that artists are so little valued by society that we cannot make enough money to pay for our needs and need to pay with our art instead. Why are artists not valued in Canada?
And that's a question directed to me.
I suppose it is. So maybe if you agree, disagree, if you have any opinion on that, perhaps.
Well, I mean, it's not just artists that are not valued. There's a lot of people not valued, right? But sure, I mean, we used to have this incredible, I do think, we do have an incredible system compared to other places, where in this exhibition, for example, all these artists that are included in the exhibition are getting an artist fee. That wouldn't happen in most countries. So there is some support as such, but the support is limited. I think we'd rather spend time on other, I guess what you would call cultural events, like building hockey stadiums and those kind of things. I don't know. I can't really answer I can't answer questions for the government we have elected, but yeah, I mean, it's funny though. It's like no matter, and I don't mean this in a positive way, I don't think, but it doesn't matter how much, how little money there is, there still seems to be really interesting work percolating, right? Because artists find a way to grow in response to those situations. I'm not advocating for those kind of situations, but if you look at someone like Tom Burroughs, I mean, who basically his career began in the mudflats, living in squats on Dollarton Highway. He found a way to kind of, now a lot of people cannot persevere in that kind of an environment and find ways to support that. So yeah, we definitely need more government funding. I mean, to go to, I was going to go into the Yoko Ono exhibition yesterday at the Vancouver Art Gallery, but my gallery membership expired. It was $24. Well, I thought, like, who is going to pay $24 to go into an art gallery unless you are really invested in it? And so you're not reaching out to larger public, and that's a government issue. That's because the Vancouver Art Gallery has to, most of their, as I understand it, most of their finances come from people paying at the gate. It's not coming from government support, although they do have that as well. How do you change that? I don't know. Any suggestions? We got an audience here.
If anyone has any suggestions, type them on the chat. We'll share them for all of us to enjoy.
Let's start a revolution.
I do believe Lisa had a question for you as well, gallery director Griffin. Are you able to share your video, Lisa?
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Patrick. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much for your grace under pressure. That I think was a master class for everyone watching. So huge applause to you for responding. And so sorry about our technical difficulties this morning. But I wanted to ask a question, and just listening to you talk and hearing you talk about this as we've gone forward with the project. And it really strikes me, and it seems core in what you were just saying, that, support structures are crucial to your work as well, and to the things that you attend to and how you understand your work, your curatorial work. And, it's been confirmed, and just even seeing the chat and, how people have talked about what this meant to them to show early on in their career. And it seems like there's this sort of intertwining support structure of you receiving support from Xenon through the gallery itself, and then learning your curatorial practice or honing it probably through that process, you supporting these artists at the beginning of their career, and Xenon supporting them through these exchanges. And it's not something that necessarily gets talked about a lot. There's this, and you were just talking about it now. So I just wondered if you might comment a little bit more on what that meant to you as a model and as a developing model, and as you were developing as a curator, to have that space to work in. And you've touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to hear more.
So touch on the broader side of support, I guess. Is that what you mean? Well, I mean, we all need support in various ways. I often get asked why I don't do this and why I don't do that. We can all only do so much. And if I could do more, I probably would. I mean, for me, I'm in a kind of luxurious and privileged position for a variety of ways. I have a permanent position as a professor, which allows me to have the luxury of, well, I do worry about my mortgage payments and all that kind of stuff. After 25 years of teaching, I'm still worrying about those things, and retirement and all that stuff. But I don't have to worry in the sense of an independent curator that is making a living from curating, because there's not that much money in that. So how do you make do? And we're living in an achievement society now where everybody has to achieve all these things, but there's no money for it, and and so on. So you're working like 5 jobs at once to make things happen. So I am in a very privileged position in that I teach, and I do this on my spare time. But as I say that, the only reason why I teach is so I can do this. So it kind of goes both ways. And I mean, this could have been a very different day job. In fact, if it wasn't for Ian Wallace, I probably would have been a carpenter or something, and I still would have curated. But he forced me to go to a job interview once when he retired from Emily Carr, and I got a job, which has been very good. So I'm very appreciative of that. But but that was support again. So that's Ian Wallace, kind of, someone who says, we need to support a younger generation to keep this kind of ecology or system alive. And, he thought that because I was curating things and doing all these things, he thought, okay, you might be a good person also to be a teacher. And there's always those kind of levels of support. The exhibitions I do not have any kind of clear structure of where they're going. That's been my intent all along, is not to know where I'm going. So I'm very interested in being lost in my curatorial strategies. As soon as I find myself knowing what I'm doing, I get very disinterested. And that's not a good way to work if you're going to be a professional curator and making a living off that, because you need to plan ahead if you work for an institution and so on. And that's why I'm very thankful for this opportunity to be so kind of flexible in doing this exhibition. We didn't really know, Lisa, when we started what this would look like. We were both kind of surprised. And even Zenon was kind of surprised at his own collection as it emerged, right? But that was research. And, that's kind of what keeps one kind of motivated and interested. But the support here, I think is just like life. You're not just supported by your peers in your particular industry. You're supported by, in this case, a dentist, but also family, friends, all kinds of things that make things happen. And I don't know what to say to that question, but other than to say, I honestly can't do anything without support. So whether it's support in terms of providing me with space, whether it's Judith Steedman designing things for me, like I always say it's like I'd be naked without like all the design for my shows, stuff like that, or someone applying for money to do something, one of my crazy projects. But so support is huge. And I do think that support, the wider that support is, the better, because that also means that for art, it's not just located in the art world. I used to always say, like, those artists run center fundraisers were always a problem, because you had artists donating art to support a gallery to exist. And it was the artist that was showing in the spaces buying the art. So it was a circular, insular system that actually never broadened out to something larger. So I think one of my intentions has always been to try to introduce art to a larger audience. And, proof is in the pudding. You put art together with a dentist, and suddenly there's a lot of interest. Because everybody can relate to the dentist, maybe, right? But then through that, maybe they can relate to art as well.
Thank you. And you've created a new model. Really, I think it's so important for people to see how many different ways that this can be achieved, and also to think about how collectors are part of that ecosystem of support.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that.
We did have a few questions coming in through the chat here. There's a question from Caleb Thiessen. Loved hearing your curation process, Patrik, with how you presented these works of art in teeth as a sense of social currency. What are your thoughts on NFTs? Are you looking to curate any exhibitions involving them?
I'm a bit of a romantic. I like things that are a little bit more physical. Maybe I'll get there. NFT, there's lots of artists, I think my favorite artist in that regard that I would gladly curate a show with, but she probably wouldn't be interested in working with me, who knows, right? But it's Sarah Mayohas. Sarah Mayohas started a project in maybe 10 years ago. I think it was about 7 or 8 years ago at least. She went to the Wharton School of Finance, same place as apparently Trump graduated from. I'm not sure if Trump graduated, but never mind. After graduating from the Wharton School of Finance, she went to art school, and she did her MFA at Yale. And for her graduation project, she produced what she called Bitcoin. It was a feminine Bitcoin. And she figured out a way to, because she had a finance background, she found a way to create the value of that Bitcoin to be tied to her photographic practice. I think she sold each coin for $25, and each coin was worth a square inch of her photography. And so you could invest, so the image and this abstract technology was kind of somehow linked. Now, there's a tradition of that. We can talk about Yves Klein, we can talk about Pier Manzoni, we can talk about Jeff Koons. Lots of artists have responded to the world by focusing on the way value is created. And so that continues. So if there was an interesting way to do a show with NFTs that talked about, that allows us to think about how, to see our world in a new way, sure, why not? I mean, in a critical light, right? Is it something that's on my mind? No. But maybe it should be. I'm still stuck. I still look for quarters in my pocket, but I like the kind of physical object a little bit too much, maybe. But yeah, but good question.
I'm seeing at least one last one here in the chat. It's from Christian Holzenga. What motivates and inspires you as a curator? Is it the artist, the work, the desire to share ideas? You spend your weekends and extra time building exhibitions. You seem more committed to the production and exhibition of art than many artists I know.
It's distraction, maybe. Maybe it's just distraction from my responsibilities. I don't know, teaching is a responsibility. I don't know, good question, Christian. I don't know. We're all motivated by different things, and we put energy into different things. And I happen to know who you are, Christian, and you put more energy into things than any other artist that I know. So I'm flattered that you say that. I don't know, it's probably at a detriment, like I should probably slow down. This year has been particularly busy. This week I basically have 3 exhibitions going, and I'm working on a large scale exhibition while I'm teaching full time, but that was because I had expected a sabbatical this year and it didn't work out. So some of it is just stupidity of bad planning, being disorganized, and then ending up in a situation where you work harder than you should. But, I have to say, even though I'm overworked and all that stuff, it is really like, the only reason why I do shows really is to spend time with art and actually thinking about artists and working with artists. And I think that comes from going to art school. I dropped out of art school. I realized I was more interested in everybody else's art than my own. And that continues. So, I think it's just kind of selfish interest that keeps me, I actually am interested in, I actually get a little bit almost like nervous when I work with larger institutions, or even like the Griffin. Well, Griffin is fairly large because I have people doing things for me. I get very antsy because I like to be hands-on, and maybe that comes out of coming out of being, having, gone to art school or something. I don't know, but I never saw the practice, that split between theory and practice. I always thought they had to be connected. So yeah, I mean, I get my kicks. I mean, some people get their kicks from like running around a track. I don't understand how they do get what they get out of that, but they do. I get my kicks out of putting exhibitions together because I never know quite how they're going to turn out, and it's problem solving. It's like puzzle building or something. I don't know, but thanks. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and for your ongoing patience as we were dealing with the technical difficulties earlier today. And thank you, Patrik, for kind of adjusting on the fly and still providing an engaging curator's tour. As I mentioned off the top, we will be trying to forward everybody the pre-recorded version of the tour, so you have a better idea of how all the works and the still images work within the space itself as we move about. So we'll try to get that to you as soon as possible. And just a few housekeeping notes on the other programming side of things that I'll mention before we sign off today. Later this month, on Sunday, October 24th at 1 p.m., Patrik will be joined by Dr. Zena Trailowski for a conversation on collecting, which will be hosted in partnership with the Contemporary Arts Society of Vancouver. It'll also be over Zoom, so you can register online. And also coming up in November, we welcome you to join us for 2 live from the studio events with Griffin's current artists in residence, Molly Burke and Tan Tan Hong. These will take place at 1 p.m. on November 7th and 21st, respectively. And of course, for those of you who have yet to see the current exhibition in person, the gallery is open Friday through Sunday weekly from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. You can visit our website for registration, and there's further information about the exhibition and future virtual programs online. So with that, I think we'll call it a day. Thank you again for joining us, and thanks so much, Patrik, for your tour today.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Zenon, especially for lending your amazing collection.
Take care, everyone. Good long weekend.